Welcome to Beyond Marketing, the podcast. I'm Maira Genovese. I'm the founder and CEO of MG Empower, global integrated market agency. Today, we're joined by one of the most influential figures in the history of modern marketing. Sir Martin Sorrell is the founder and former CEO of WPP, and today he is the executive chairman of S4 Capital. For decades, his thinking has shaped how agents are structured, how creativity and strategy are valued, and how marketing operates at a global scale. In this episode, we'll explore leadership through transformation, the evolution of agents' models, and why creativity and strategy remain essential, especially in the AI-driven world. Welcome to Beyond the Marketing, the podcast, Sir Martin Sorrell. What a pleasure. Good. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here this morning. So I would like to start with, it's more like everyone knows Sir Martin Sorrell, but with your own words, who is Sir Martin Sorrell?
Well, that's for others to figure out. Not for me to say.
Not for you. I would say like a big fan, big admirer of your work.
Good.
And not sure if you remember where we met.
Where was that?
Cannes Lions.
Okay.
I approached you and we started the conversation. So I'm very glad that conversation brought us here.
Good.
We just wanted to get from you, like with all change that's happening in the industry of marketing, and we're seeing like how AI is kind of scaling really rapidly. But I love.
Well, it's not scaling rapidly. I think that's the issue. It's scaling, I would say, incrementally, but not rapidly. We see a little bit in visualization and copywriting. We see a little bit in personalization at scale. We see a little bit in media planning and buying, but no wholesale adoption, except maybe in the automobile verticals because of Chinese EV competition and AV competition. And then secondly, in financial services because of the fintech platforms. But I would disagree. I think AI has not affected the industry yet to any significant degree. It's people talk a lot about it, like you do, and others, and I'm on podcasts, but that's not the reality. So I disagree. I think it's been very slow in terms of adoption, and what probably is needed a little bit of economic force. I mean, a little bit of economic pressure in order to, because in those two verticals I mentioned, automobiles and financial services, there's economic pressure from lower cost alternative suppliers or producers or manufacturers. There's blowing a chill wind.
Agree.
For the fossil fuel manufacturers or car manufacturers, the traditional manufacturers, and also the traditional branch banks. So I sort of disagree. I think we're at the threshold. People test, they do workshops, they experiment, but they don't do much.
I think when I didn't phrase well in the same as I scale.
There's a lot of capacity being built. Yes, but that's not agencies doing that.
Yeah.
In fact, it's probably the opposite.
Because I feel like
the agencies probably haven't built capacity. Hence, you see IPG surrendering, giving up, and being acquired by Omnicom, and whether there will be other similar capacity reductions, I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. I mean, Dentsu International is for sale, certainly in whole or in part. WPP probably is vulnerable because its market cap is now, $5 billion? Having been as high as 25 billion, and you've got two, Omnicom and Publicis at 25 billion. You've got Dentsu at about 7 or 8 billion, and WPP at 5, and Havas at 1.5. So I have to see how all that shakes out. I don't see anybody at the moment who's got the enthusiasm or guts to take on the significant management challenges at Dentsu International or WPP, because they're both in a tough spot. Havas does have capacity. It doesn't have financial capacity on its own. The Bolloré family have got access to significant financial capacity to make it work. But beyond that, it's quite difficult for Havas on its own. The two companies that are in real trouble, Dentsu International and WPP, it's so complex, and then there's this cloud of AI hanging over it because people are finding it difficult to analyze whether it's what exactly the impact of AI will be on the traditional industry. Markets have said, because they've compressed the valuations. I mean, even Publicis and Omnicom are selling significantly. Their market prices are significantly off their highs. So the market is saying, we're not sure about what the impact of AI will be on your traditional model. So we've got a maybe 26. President Trump was on broadcasting last night about what may or may not happen next year. We'll see what happens in the midterms. I think he'll do well in the midterms. It was intriguing that Susie Wiles gave that interview to Vanity Fair. I mean, looking at the pictures, they claim that she was misquoted or the quotes were mispositioned. But looking at the pictures, they obviously knew that it was either going to be a book or a major article, because there were some heavily stylized photographs. But what's interesting about it is, why did she give that set of interviews? And one of the possibilities could be that she's nervous about the results of the midterms and won't be around afterwards. I don't think so. From the article, she was quite confident, and I think she's right to be confident. The big, beautiful tax bill will kick in March or April of next year with a lot of subsidies for taxpayers. So I think Trump will go to the country in the midterms with a tailwind. But the economic difficulties may come after that, and that's when the pressure might build. I mean, US companies are doing well at the minute. EPS Q3 of this year was up 12%. You take out the hyperscalers, up 9% next year. Still forecasting, Goldman are forecasting 12% EPS growth, which is very strong. And it's a little bit odd for the agencies, because usually when companies are doing well, not usually, historically, when companies do well and profitably, agencies do well. That's not the case now. And I think the reason is agencies are really heavily represented in the 300 billion of ad revenues that are going south in traditional media, rather than the 700 billion which are going north, dominated by Alphabet, by Meta, by Amazon, Alibaba, Tencent, and ByteDance. So it's a difficult environment for traditional agencies to navigate, and I think there will be continued pressure because of the growth of digital. Now 70% of the market, probably by 2030 be up to about 80%, and it continues to dominate. And the agencies don't have as significant representation in that growing 700 billion as they do have in the declining 300 billion. So my view is AI will become more and more attractive, but it needs a little bit of economic pressure on clients to adopt faster. It's about change management. It's not about technology, about change management. And turkeys don't vote for Christmas, so people will be hesitant to change until they have to.
But do you have any optimistic view for the future? Of the future of agents, because you're saying
no, not for the traditional agencies, no.
So what's your view about?
Well, it depends. Everybody conflates what's happening in the traditional markets with the digital markets, and it's two different markets. It's $1 trillion, or last year it was $1 trillion. This year it'll be about 1.1. Next year 1.2. And last year 700 billion was growing. That's around, as I said before, around Alphabet, around Meta, Amazon, Alibaba, Tencent, and TikTok or ByteDance. The traditional, the 300 billion, the fight for Warner Brothers Discovery between Netflix and Paramount is really a fight over an asset which has got declining revenues.
Crazy.
Well, it's not crazy. I mean, it may well. I mean, I wouldn't say that Ted Sarandos and Greg Peters and Reed Hastings are crazy. Far from it. They're extremely intelligent. So I assume they know what they're doing. But the struggle between Paramount and between Netflix for Warner Bros. Discovery is a struggle for a company whose ad revenues are declining. And it's a company which didn't have live sport like Disney or like Fox, which didn't have live sport to buttress the decline. So when you say about agencies, if you're talking about traditional agencies, the future is pretty grim. If you're talking about digital agencies that are focused on that space, that's a space that's growing at 10, 15, 20%. I would say the future is rosy. So, unfortunately, analysts, when they analyze the business, journalists, when they write about the business, conflate two markets into one. And there's two different worlds. One is a digital world that's growing, and one is a traditional that's declining.
You talk a lot about creative and strategy not being replaced by technology, meaning AI.
Well, I think that is the case, but of course, it's the hope. There is I think for the next, I don't know how long it will be. If you look at some of the stuff that Eric Schmidt has been talking about, so there's some interesting, actually, some films on TikTok of Eric Schmidt talking about the impact of machines on not just our industry but generally. There will come a time when machines will be more powerful than people. There are some people who believe that's never can be the case. I'm not sure I agree. And Geoffrey Hinton, who was one of the founders of DeepMind, if you remember, he resigned from DeepMind because he thought he was worried about the existential threat of AI, the existential threat being that machines will become more powerful than people. Well, we in our industry cling on to the belief, I think quite rightly, I don't think it's wrong, but it may be a short to medium term thing, that the technology is the tools and people will be empowered by the tools and strengthened by the tools, which I think is the case in the short to medium term. Whether that means in the longer term, we might be in a situation where the machines actually become more powerful than people, we'll have to see. It's interesting, in Eric's, I was looking at the film a couple of days ago, he says that when machines become more powerful, we should pull the plug. So we shall see. There will be bad actors. The Oppenheimer moment, as I've said before, has gone. The opportunity for us to control the expansion of AI in a coordinated fashion, for governments to do it, has gone. They've gone beyond that. These are nation states. The head of MI6 is very interesting. She was interviewed. She did her annual interview a couple of days ago, and she said that the heads of the tech companies are like country presidents, and I've been saying for a significant period of time they're like nation states. And if you run a company which has got a $4 trillion market cap, or like Nvidia, $5 trillion, and Musk's compensation is geared to Tesla getting to 10 trillion, a $10 trillion company, and I think Musk will get there. A $10 trillion company would be the third, if you equate market cap to GDP, would be the third largest country in the world after the US and China. The US is 28 trillion and China's 18. So they are like country presidents. And if you're 4 or 5 trillion, I was in India recently, last week or so, that's as big as India. Bigger than the UK, bigger than France, bigger than Germany, bigger than this, but probably about the same size as Germany, bigger than Italy, but bigger than Spain. So these guys, they are all guys, actually. There's not a woman amongst them, sadly. These guys are country presidents, and they have enormous power. And they're investing $500 billion a year in expanding AI capacity, data centers, energy sources, and chip capabilities. So they're going to get more powerful, not less powerful. But that ability to control them, I think, is gone. So I'm not gloomy about it. What I'm just saying is, I think, realistic about it. So for the agency industry, it means you have to accelerate your exit from traditional media and accelerate your entry into the digital ecosystem, or whatever you want to call it.
And what about the consumer?
What about the consumer?
Because consumer, we can see that more and more, yes, of course, they're engaging with technology, with AI, but it's clear consumer want brand experience.
Consumers have engaged more with AI than enterprise. And that's the interesting thing, is that we as consumers use AI far more, I think, all the data shows, than enterprises have used it in doing their business. So the consumers actually have engaged with it far more. I mean, everybody you talk to, from kids aged 4 or 5, maybe even younger now, to people my age, are amazed by the power of AI, what it can deliver in a nanosecond in terms of information. In terms, I mean, you use Nano Banana. I was using it recently, a day or so ago. It's quite extraordinary what you can do with that. So, everybody can become a copywriter and a visualizer. Everybody can become an advertising agent, at least in some sense. We'll see how capable they become as a result of it. But no, it's democratizing, and I sort of disagree with you. I think consumers, it's sort of almost like a K economy where consumers have embraced the technology and enterprises have only done it sporadically or episodically. They haven't done it generally.
Yeah, because it was just more like on the human connection side. So do you think this will be less and less, or?
Well, I mean, it's not just about AI. I mean, one of the things we're having to wrestle with, I mean, it was accelerated by COVID, is the lack of connection. Now, what's really interesting is people crave experiences, maybe because they have less social interaction. The propensity, if that's the right way of putting it, of people to travel, to experience live experiences, to want to engage with one another has got greater. I mean, when you look at the travel statistics, given the way the economies are behaving, you look at the travel statistics, you look at where people are spending their money, you look at inflation and its impact on food prices and everything. It is quite remarkable that people travel through airports. It is quite remarkable. In fact, I would say, I don't know what the stats are, but my guess is that business travel, because of the use of technology, so the technology enables you to do things that you didn't do before, but live experiences, there is a thirst for. So all these technologies, because they become more, they're used in a more distributed way, probably are going to cause all these social issues that we talk about in relations to, loneliness, fewer friends, all those statistics that people talk about. What's really interesting about the technology, and I'm intuitively against the idea, is the technology enables you to do things in a much more distributed way. I don't think being out of the office is a good thing. I think people should be in the office 7 days a week.
I was about to ask you that.
Yeah, but all the data. I've been involved with Harvard Business School on their D3 initiative around AI. The data from the research they have, it's really interesting, suggests that distributed working is more effective and more productive. I'm not sure I agree with that, but I think in our own case with S4 and Monks during COVID, at the beginning of it, it was good, and we gained from it. Because we are digital natives and tech nerds, and therefore it was a good environment for us. But I think it's sort of over time, as people have become quotes unquote used to it, it's not been abused, but I think it's become a little bit more lackadaisical, and I think it's a real issue. Most of the people my age or in my generation who are running or trying to run companies. We've seen it with WPP and supposedly not well received. We've seen it with Omnicom. We've seen it with JP Morgan. They all say, come back into the office. JP Morgan's an interesting example because they're building these huge offices in, 8 billion, was it, pounds of cost for a building in New York. And they're going to build one in Canary Wharf here. I was in Mumbai a day or so ago, and they've got a huge office there as well. So they're in the business of building huge offices. So
not know if the employees will come.
A lot of spend if people are not in them. But I think distributed working, certainly in our industry, if you lose the spark, the sparks flying between people constructively. Flying between people. Now, there are some jobs like coding, I guess. Well, coding gets done by AI now, but engineering jobs maybe can be done remotely. But generally in our business, I think it's good for people to be together.
It's important.
Very interesting. It was a piece of research that the HBS people did on, The argument against distributed working is young people and entrants don't learn about the company. So what the researchers done was develop programs for companies to get people to learn about companies, learn about company cultures in a distributed way. And the results were pretty good according to the research. So actually a lot of the HBS research points to the opposite of what I think, which is distributed working works. It produces more productivity. It's particularly good for men and women with big families or with families. The trend post-COVID was to move away from city centres, or because of expense as well as COVID, etc. So distributed working may be a fact of life that we have to become aware of, and have to, in my case, lump.
Because you mentioned a few times that you don't believe in work-life balance.
No, I didn't say that. No, so again, that's misquoting. It's a bit like Susie Wiles and her article. Well, actually, she didn't say she was misquoted. She said it was out of context. No, I didn't say that. No, what I said was, if you're not having fun, then it's not, then it's work, right? And we're saying if you do what you enjoy, it's work-life balance goes out the window, doesn't it?
100%.
I mean, if you enjoy something, you presumably you like to do it.
I agree.
Therefore, it's not work. I mean, work in the sense of it's a 4-letter word beginning with W, which some people don't like.
Totally
But if you do
agree.
what you enjoy, then it's not work.
I agree.
So that's all I was saying. I wasn't saying work-life balance. I wasn't saying family isn't important or anything like that. I was just saying that you should enjoy what you do.
Yeah, if you're passionate about what you do. So, and what about S4? What's
What
the
about it?
future S4?
Well, we've got a lot more work to do. I mean, we're digital only, data driven. We go to market as more efficient, and we're unitary. I think that's a model, ironically, which the holding companies, in a funny way, have all got to do more of. I mean, they've got to be more digital. They've got to be more data driven. They've got to be more agile, because they're indicted for lacking agility, and they're multi-branded, and all of them are trying to become one company. I mean, we wait with bated breath to see what the strategic unveil for WPP is in January with McKinsey's help. But my bet would be we have to be one WPP. We have to get rid of all that overhead that's built up at the holding company level, the group brand level, and then the brand level. If you look at the people in Sea Container House, for example, in London, what do they all do?
It's true.
So it'll be about overhead, and it'll be about how do we get everybody to work together in a much more concerted way. It's not. If you're running Ogilvy, for example, you really have to look at it in the context of WPP. You can't look at it in the context of Ogilvy. So, and Omnicom are going to do the same. Publicis have done it, or have done it to the most sophisticated degree. Havas are doing it. Dentsu have tried it, but maybe there's something in the Japanese management culture that prevents it from happening. It hasn't happened very successfully. Coming back to S4, we have to do it more effectively than we've done before. We haven't done it as well as we could do.
Do you think the challenge of integrating agency based
It's
on
a challenge of integration per se. I mean, integrating business, organic growth is always better than growth through mergers or acquisitions. Mergers and acquisitions are difficult. They're easy to do, but difficult to implement. And getting people to work together. Our industry is not an industry where people work together easily. They love to be on podcasts. They love to be on the front page of Campaign or Ad Age, and it's more about them, the individual, than the institution. The real, and I've said this before, more than work-life balance, is the real jewels are the people who share. So those people who who can run Ogilvy. I would call out somebody like Miles Young. Young could run Ogilvy and run it brilliantly, and at the same time contribute to what was going on at WPP. Those people are very rare. There are people that can run a brand well, but then don't, in the context of the organization, share stuff. AI is really interesting because it may ensure, through democratizing knowledge, that happens. Because people control things by controlling information. If you're running a silo, a vertical, how do you maintain control of it at the top? Is by restricting the information. Jensen Huang's really interesting. He has 51 direct reports. I've said this many, many times. You went to McKinsey and asked them what's the appropriate management span. They would say 12 or 13 direct reports. With Jensen, he manages to do it with 51. Doesn't do apparently many one-on-ones. Sets people objectives for the year, and monitors their success or otherwise in achieving those objectives. And I think that's what you're going to see. I think you're going to see flattening of the organization when people really adopt AI at scale. And the other thing that's interesting is that the deeper you go inside companies, I think the more people are prepared to share knowledge. The deeper you go, there's sort of like an inverse relationship between sharing and where you are in a company. The deeper you go, the more people share. The further up you go, the mucky mucks like to control the information and prevent it, because that's how they maintain their power.
100%.
And what you really want is you want everybody sharing at huge scale. And AI enables you to do that. If you give people access to everything, like we have, I think it's 900 people working on Google globally. If you give them access to everything we're doing on Google, as long as it's secure and the right management levels, that's a huge advantage because everybody knows
the data
can contribute. And that's, I think, what people don't understand still. I mean, the internet was the first breakthrough. Smartphones, mobile phone was the second breakthrough, if you like, and then the third breakthrough is AI.
You've been in this journey for many, many, many years. Do you get excited every time there is an industry change?
Well, I mean, whether it's exciting or not, I mean, it's interesting to explore. You've got the IPO of SpaceX coming in 26, and been thinking about that. I mean, market valuation, it's gone from 800 billion, I think, to potentially 1.5 trillion. It'll make Elon Musk even wealthier. No, you get excited about that. I mean, yes, I mean you do, and it's to me, SpaceX will be like Google when it floated in 1999, I think it was, Amazon when it went public, Meta Facebook when it went public. SpaceX to me will be another Nvidia, obviously, Microsoft. I mean, these are all companies. I mean, the interesting thing about our industry is that we've witnessed the growth and development of all those companies. SpaceX probably doesn't influence our industry as much as maybe the other things I mentioned. Obviously, the internet did, the smartphone did, AI does, but maybe we'll have an agency on the moon. Who knows? Or on Mars. But that heralds another really interesting era. So, and SpaceX, you've had Jeff Bezos with Blue Origin. You've had Richard Branson, all space explorers, and you've had others. There was the Russian guy, I don't remember his name, who was also really interested in space travel. Yuri, can't remember what his second name was. But so you've had these people who've said how important space development and exploration will be. But I think SpaceX and the IPO will be a seminal moment in the development of space travel.
And what about, can I ask the future in terms of you talk about the agents model will change, and in 2026
Right.
will
Well,
continue to.
again, I think you're painting everything with the same brush. There's a sort of traditional agency model which is
Is
changing.
changing.
So you could say, if you were looking, the irony is, and nobody's written about this, the original holding company was IPG. There was a guy called Marion Harper in the 1950s who used to have a Boeing jet that he used to, I think it was, maybe it wasn't a jet, maybe it was a jet at that time, which he was supposed to, the apocryphal stories of him coming to London and staying, because McCann and Lintas and others had their major operations with the US and Europe at that time, because Asia and Latin America. Ogilvy and JWT have developed their businesses in Asia and Latin America, but the Americans have been very focused on the US and Europe. Anyway, Marion Harper used to come, and his theory was you couldn't have conflicting accounts in the same agency. I don't know whether his thinking was also that it was better to have people focused on smaller units and incentivized around smaller units. I don't know, but certainly a big part of his thesis was if you want Unilever and Procter in the same, or Ford and GM in the same business, you had to have separate brands.
Friends.
That's now. I mean, the irony is Krakowski sells IPG to Omnicom. My forecast is Krakowski will be out of there pretty quickly now that the deal's done, and the senior IPG management seem to have been crushed. I mean, I was in India, as I said this week, and there's a lot of uncertainty there for that reason, because the IPG management, which in India, for example, is quite strong, sort of being subjugated to Omnicom management. I think that's causing stresses and strains already, even though we're in the sort of first or second innings. But that model is a busted flush. And so, and the other problem is what I've said to you before, which is the holding companies are concentrated in the 300 billion that's not growing rather than the 700 billion that's growing. So they have to flip their model into a one Publicis, one WPP, one Omnicom model, create a more unitary company for all the reasons we've been discussing. And then, of course, they have to embrace the digital and data side. To be fair, Publicis has got a better story than the reason that Publicis wins business. They've got a better story. Whether they can deliver on that story is another
story.
They've got a better story.
And then markets that will be growing for the next 2-3 years. You talk a lot about India. So do you think there's any other?
No, I think U.S.-China relationships are not good. I don't think they're going to get any better. They might do in the short term, and they might come to some agreement over tariffs in the short term. But in the long term, they're on a collision course. The Americans think. I think the world should be They think the world should be a G1 world, and China believes it should be G2, and I probably side with the Chinese on that. The world is changing. So BRICS, Next 11, the global south are becoming more important. The E7 is bigger than the G7 GDP-wise. And if you exclude China from the E7 and exclude US from the G7, the E6 bigger than the G6. So the world is changing, and I think America has to get used to it. Having said that, America will always be a very strong, vibrant economy. It's 28 trillion out of 106, so it's almost a third of the world. And in addition, most of the big companies are housed there. So, if you're running an agency business, there's a US magnet that you get tracked. So US will always be strong, and Canada. The Latin America, I think, is underrated, both technologically and creatively. I think super good people in both areas. Middle East and APAC. The one problem in APAC is how big do you want to be in China? China's 18 trillion, so you should be 20% of your business in China, at least in theory. Do you want to be bigger given the Taiwan risk? Probably not. So India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore all become more and more important, along with, of course, Japan and Australia and New Zealand, which are the more traditional markets. Africa is too volatile, I think. Longer term, obviously, it'll become increasingly important, but it's too many conflicts, too volatile, and Europe is in trouble. Europe, UK is in trouble. We've had 2 quarters of minus 0.1. India is growing at 6 or 7%, and is bigger than the UK. Right? I mean, a lot of Indians I saw this last week were unhappy with Modi. I think Modi is really super good and a great leader. We need more of Modi here, I think. But they're growing. They're bigger than us, and they're growing at 6 or 7%. When we're going backwards for 2 quarters at 0.1%. So we're in a pretty pathetic state. France is in a tough position too. Italy maybe a little bit better recently with Meloni, but not much. Spain maybe a little bit better. The pigs, as they're called, Portugal, Italy, Greece and Spain have done a little bit better, the periphery of Europe. But Europe as a whole is in deep doo-doo. And Poland, okay. Some of the Eastern European countries, okay, but the threat of Russia. So you've got US, China, Russia. I was just reading an article this morning, what it was actually in the Susie Wiles interview. She said Rubio and Trump believe that Putin wants the whole of Ukraine, or that it's not quite as definitive as that, but some of the things that Putin been doing and saying and not responding to indicates he wants the whole of Ukraine. I mean, to my mind, Putin wants to recreate the Russia of Peter the Great or Catherine the Great, and that's a problem. And then there's the Iranian problem. Iran is not going to go away, and as the recent terrible events are indicating, the extreme Muslim issue is going to continue to be a very big issue politically. In that world, its fragmentation becomes more and more important. So picking where you're going to grow a business is really more important. So 2 things: geographical fragmentation and then technological change. And that's those are 2 big challenges for the holding companies, because they're everywhere and there are some places they shouldn't be. And their size means their ability to adapt and develop agility in technology makes it more difficult.
Is there any where the meat and small agents?
Sorry?
Meat agency and small agency, where are the opportunities for that?
In that environment, in theory, I mean, it's only theoretical, there should be more opportunity. I mean, Omnicom and IPG getting together, if my experience in India is any judge of what's going on, that's 1 country out of 100 they operate in. There's a lot of confusion amongst clients and a lot of confusion amongst people. And with confusion comes opportunity. So I would say it is probable that in 2026 we'll see more clients reviewing what they're doing, and potentially changing. The other thing that puzzles me, and I haven't got the answer to it, is this usually when companies are growing at the rate they're going, if their EPSs are growing at 12%, which, as I said before, the S&P 500 grew at that in the Q3, and the forecast for next year are 12%. You would expect agencies to be doing well. The reason they aren't doing well, I think, is because they're concentrated in the 300 billion that's shrinking. The problem with the 700 billion that's growing is it's growing not by spending more money on marketing spend, but by filling out their capacity. I was just reading an article about Oracle spending 35 billion on expanding its data capacity and AI capacity, which is half of its revenues, and upping its spend and getting indebted in the process. The other companies like Microsoft and Alphabet and Meta and Amazon, although they're spending more money than Oracle, they're not as indebted. And the Oracle spending on AI is causing concern. I mean, the share price boomed on the AI orders and has now come way back. Maybe there's a mix in there about the Ellisons or Larry Ellison guaranteeing the Warner Brothers Discovery bid by Skydance, by Paramount Skydance. Well, I don't know, but the credit default swap spreads on Oracle have widened significantly. So people are getting a little bit nervous about the debt loads that are being taken on and some of the arrangements, the private debt financing of that spending. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But the problem for us, S4 and Monks, is our tech clients, which are 50% of our revenue, are really spending money on CapEx, not OpEx. So they're not spending money on marketing spend, or as much as they used to. They're really focusing on increasing AI capacity.
Thank you. I think it's incredible to see how interesting the AI is, and it's playing around not just companies but also clients' decision, as you just said, about spending, right? Sure. In terms of people's job, because you talk a lot about the future of jobs with the AI. If you have to give a piece of advice for jobs that can be replaced by technology, what those people will have to, how do we have to, find other ways to learn new skills?
I obviously don't know. You can guess. In the areas that we see impact of AI in our industry, so visualization and copywriting, I think there'll be fewer art directors and fewer copywriters. So there'll be fewer opportunities. There'll be better opportunities using the technology, but there'll be fewer of them. So that's one. On personalization at scale, probably more jobs, because we can do things at huge scale and we can do more of them. Media planning and buying, there are apparently 250,000 people doing media planning and buying. There'll be fewer of them. And the algorithms will be more important, but the output from the algorithms is better than what the human mind can.
100%.
And therefore be more opportunity for adoption. General efficiency areas, probably there'll be some new jobs created, some old jobs destroyed. And then on the democratization of knowledge, I think that's a huge opportunity, because I think that will provide more opportunities inside companies. But overall, Sam Altman a couple of years ago said 95% of advertising jobs are going to go. I think he was exaggerating to make a point, but I think directionally he's probably right. If you pin me against the wall, some people say, no, it's wrong. Every technological development, including the printing press, has created more opportunities. I'm not sure that this time that's right. I think we'll be able to have more holidays as a result. So I think there will be different kinds of jobs. 5 years ago, you said, what advice can I give? I would say learn Chinese. A couple of years ago, I added Spanish, and I always said learn code. You don't have to learn them anymore. AI can do it for you. But I think you still have to learn those things, because it sort of educates your mind or trains your mind in a different way. But some of the things that are happening, we'll see. Maybe space travel will give us so many.
I can see that you're excited about this space travel.
That's really, I hate heights. I get vertigo on a deep pile carpet. So I'm not one for traveling
to
spaceships and all that sort of stuff. But I do think it's fascinating to see what may or may not happen.
Sir Martin Sorrell, thank you so much for being here. So if you're not following us yet, please make sure you do on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Podcast, and Apple Podcast. And now we have our own Instagram account, Beyond Marketing Podcast, where you can see all the news, all the teasers of the guests, and following us there too.